You come to me when I'm lonely. I take your hand and we go home. You cover me with your lovely.
Hello and welcome to Sasha Graham's Ghost Stories by the Fire, Season 2. I'm your host, Sasha Graham. I'm broadcasting from WHNY Western Catskill Radio 93.6 FM on your radio dial. It's just after midnight. I'm hoping you'll stick around and burn some of that midnight oil with me, because I've been out in the wild collecting ghost stories just for you. I'm broadcasting tonight's show from the old fire tower in Wands Hollow, New York. So, for you locals listening in, we have a wild, windy night in store. Expect spotty power outages and loose debris. Use caution if driving, especially on bridges and elevated roads. If you're already home, tucked safely under the covers, relax and snuggle in to the sound of my voice. If you hear something scratching on your window pane or thumping on the roof, it's probably just the wind. Tonight, I have a trinity of tales, all involving aspects of theater and performing. Tonight's tales are eerie, uncanny, and trust me when I say our final story will leave you with more questions than answers. So have your tickets in hand for the usher, grab a drink at the bar before settling into your seats, because I'm about to dim the lights and raise the red curtain for tonight's show. Welcome to Season 2 of Sasha Graham's Ghost Stories by the Fire, Episode 20. The ghouls must go on. Do you remember your first big breakup? Whether you were the breaker-upper or the breakee, it hurts when lovers separate, and we never forget romantic heartbreak. Some people say we are extra vulnerable to spiritual attacks when we are tired, exhausted, or even worse, when we are nursing a broken heart. And it's sometimes in those vulnerable states, with all defenses down, that we see or feel something that we might have otherwise overlooked, as our first storyteller found out. You'll hear my voice introducing this speaker as I bring him to the stage, but let me first say that Colin McPhillamy is an actor who has appeared on Broadway, the West End, film and TV, but who I met in the tarot occult world. He and all of tonight's guests were recorded live at a Sasha Graham's Ghost Stories by the Fire event at the Barrows and Tents Tasting Room in Brooklyn, New York. Now, here's Colin McPhillamy with The Screaming Monk of HAMPSTEAD, HEATH.
I'm really excited to bring up my closing storyteller. He's an incredible tarotist. He's an amazing astrologer. He's an absolutely phenomenal actor. And it was funny because I got to see you on stage long after I knew you from like our tarot work. And I was just like, he's on Broadway, so of course he's good, but I'm like, Bill, he's really good. He's just, you're such a wonderful talent, and I'm so happy that you're here tonight. You have a history. I think you recently were playing Scrooge. And so he is very much part and parcel of the invisible world. He's about to return to Broadway. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend Colin McPhillamy.
Thank you, Sasha. I feel like I should hand you about $20 for that introduction. I'm an actor, a stage actor, so you've never heard of me. And one of the reasons for that is that although I do have a small, modest portfolio of victim of the week roles in things like Law and Order, being a stage actor is a fabulously effective way to remain unknown to the general public. In fact, I think they use it in witness protection programs sometimes. Amazing stories that we've heard. It's wonderful. And it makes me feel that, that I'm not alone, that I haven't actually lost my mind over the years. And it was at the Old Vic that I met this staggeringly beautiful actress. Well, I thought so anyway. And we fell into a relationship, as, can happen in theatres when you're in a play together. It's called a showmance. And you know how it is when you get sensitive to the other side? There are a number of ways to open up the chakras. Yoga, calisthenics perhaps, illegal substances, not really recommended. One surefire way is to fall in love with someone who's not in love with you. I speak from experience on this. Anyway, our showmance lasted about a year. It was a lot of fun. It was up and down, on again, off again. It was very late at night and all that means. Then I went away on tour again, and 6 weeks later, I woke up one morning to realize I was in love with this girl. And I thought, this is fantastic. I'm in love. And I know it. So I drove through the night down the motorway to London, rocked up at about dawn. I'm in love with you. Too late, she says, because now I'm with Andy. Have you ever had your heart broken? Anyone? Yeah, okay. Well, you know what it's like, You can't sleep, you can't eat, you don't want to. You ring up all your friends and you bore them with your version of what went wrong, right? All that. You take a bottle of vodka, not a very good idea. Anyway, one night, I had my best friend, Jim, and I used to bore him with my version of what went wrong. We went out to a pub and we had a pint of beer. It was a very modest drinking night, and I say that because at the time, heartbroken as I was really in training to drink for England. And I think if I'd carried on, I would have won a gold, But anyway, I had a pint of beer, just the one, and I was walking home, and I was going to take a shortcut across Hampstead Heath. I don't know if you've been to London, some of you may know where that is. It's 700 acres of semi-wild woodland. It's a really magnificent place. And it's pretty civilized. I say semi-wild, And there's a place called Parliament Hill, and it's called Parliament Hill because if you approach London from the north, it's the first place where you can see the Houses of Parliament. So I'm walking up this hill, and I begin to be aware that each step is becoming incrementally more difficult to take. And little by little, a mist begins to rise on the ground. And I'm walking up the slope to Parliament Hill, and to my right, there's a meadow, which in the daytime is completely visible, but now it's very misty. And suddenly, quite suddenly, I can barely move, and I see in the distance of about 100 yards an enormous figure, which I would say was about the height of this ceiling, which would be, 12, 13 feet high. It's a monk, and it's shrouded in a white cowl, and it's running towards me. Running, but it's not getting any closer, thank God. But while it's running, it's screaming! It's screaming, right? Now, there's a phrase in Hamlet in which I played the ghost. It's one thing to play a ghost. It's another thing to see one. The phrase in Hamlet is, distilled almost to jelly with the act of fear. And I can tell you, I attest to the meaning of that line. I've never been so frightened. And I could barely move, and this thing was rushing towards me and screaming. And I thought, what do I do? Well, when it comes to the spiritual life, I'd categorize myself as a lapsed, non-observant neo-pagan, right? But I knew what you're meant to do if you see a ghostly presence that might be hostile is, as Sasha said, you can always refuse. You can't come in, not now. But another good remedy is to say a prayer. So, I mean, it's like they say, there are no atheists at sea, right? So I start to pray. And I can't even turn round. But what I can do is walk backwards. And after a while, I've covered about 10 yards, and the screaming diminishes. And with each step backwards I take, the presence gets less. So I decide, I'm imagining it, I'll test it. I walk forward, immediately it starts screaming again. Okay. So that put another 2 miles on my late night walk home. I had to go round the heath, and finally I got home. The next day I went back on a bicycle. It was pure daylight. The place is like a park. It's full of people. There's absolutely no trace of that experience, except in the meadow there's a plinth. It's a sort of stone pyramid type shape, obelisk shape, commemorating something, I don't know what. So I wonder if it's connected with that, but there's absolutely no trace. Well, here's the twist. I was in therapy at the time for the heartbreak, and all that good stuff. So I said to the therapist next time I saw him, I said, well, you thought, I told him about this when it happened. I said, you thought I was crazy, but now you know I am, right? And here's the twist, because he said, no. I said, what do you mean no? He said, no, exactly the same thing happened to me. Thank you very much.
Wow, talk about a confirmation. We go to therapy to sort our issues out and be seen, but how often is it that the therapists themselves have swum in the same supernatural soup as us? And I wonder what could have happened to that monk to provoke his eternal screaming. Was it the bland food, the vow of poverty, or all that abstinence? I love how Colin said, it's one thing to play a ghost, but another thing to see a ghost. Isn't that the truth? Actors get paid to play parts, bring roles to life, and wear metaphorical theatrical masks, but actors aren't alone in it. Aren't we all playing the part of who we think we are or would like to be? Don't we all wear masks when we step into the outside world? The mask of our jobs, our personal style, and the mask we wear to gain the approval of others. But what would happen if we stopped trying to fool everyone else, and most importantly, ourselves? What if we took off the mask and stood in the naked truth of who we actually are? I dare you to try it, because that just might be scarier than any screaming ghost. Our next story isn't told by an actor, but from the point of view of an audience member. What would happen if you went off for a night of theater and discovered an energy from your evening's entertainments had hitched a ride home with you? Our second storyteller experienced this very scenario and lived to tell us about it. Heather Carlucci is a psychic medium, medical intuitive, and frequent storyteller at Ghost Stories by the Fire. She spun the following tale on May 10th, 2023. Here is Heather Carlucci with the Provincetown Poltergeist.
Hi, everybody. How are you? So, I'm a psychic medium, and what I write about are things that I've already experienced. Is everybody here new, or has people been here before? Anybody? Hi. Okay. I've done this story before because I'm kind of working on it, and under Sasha's influence, the book is coming together. So enjoy. Provincetown, Massachusetts is on the farthest tip of Cape Cod. It's a gay haven, well, now a queer haven, and I've been to many such places in my lifetime, but never P-Town. Friends had asked me there many times, but something always came up. About 4 years ago, my dearest friend said that I just had to go and it must be with them. And I ignored my disdain for Massachusetts and their heralded history of burning witches, and I packed my car. And so there we were, a perfect sunny, warm October weekend. You know, everybody gets around in P-Town on bikes, and I don't like bikes. I gotta be honest, my crotch doesn't like bikes. And since a motorcycle accident at age 19 where I suffered amnesia, I stay away from things like with wheels and no doors. But this was very much a when in Rome weekend, and I promised myself I would somehow find that joy. So immediately after checking into the hotel, it came to our attention that this weekend was the Tennessee Williams Theater Festival. Every venue had a production of one of his works for the entire weekend, and the only available tickets were at the theater in the Provincetown Inn. A show called Death of Drag Queens or something uplifting like that. Oh my God, I cannot wait to take you there. Aaron stayed there 5 years ago and woke up with a woman standing over his bed with a string of pearls. And I hear these kinds of things a lot. Everybody wants to take me somewhere grim. Joey looked at me. Girl, you've got to see the murals they have hanging in there. It's f***ing weird. So we purchased the tickets, got on our bikes, and rode all the way down to the end of the Cape to the inn. It is right where the Pilgrims first landed. They actually landed there first and then went out to Plymouth Rock and then came back. So we went inside, and Joey grabbed my arm to run through the lobby and down the hall before the great room to see all of these murals. There must have been 10 of them depicting different scenes, and weird it was. There was one called Pilgrim's First Laundry, and there were pilgrims standing knee-deep in the ocean, fully dressed, with blank looks on their faces. On the next panel, seemingly the same scene, there were 1920s sunbathers in their tank suits with stereotypically dressed Native Americans waving to them from the shore. And then a group of children playing in the middle of the street. One child had his entire fist in his mouth. He had come to be known as the bulimic child. Each mural possessed an image which made you say, what the fuck? So the closer we get to the great room, it got warmer and more flush I got. I turned to look into it and I felt full-on nausea. I saw visions of nooses and torture and bloodshed and pleasure. We heard a woman's voice call for everyone to be seated in the theater, and I looked at my friends a bit lost and said, you mean we're still gonna go to the show? They looked at me and they rolled their eyes. The show added all this discomfort as a 45-minute tribute to domestic abuse. It was not a good situation. Even Kathleen Turner, being in the front row, didn't even take the edge off. And during the show, I kept feeling a scratching on what felt like 2 fingernails on my left hand. It was quick, and I brushed it off. And it happened again, then when the show was over, and as I walked out, I felt it again as I thought somebody was brushing against my hand, but nobody was there. I ran out of that hotel. We rode back to ours and had a nightcap, and then went back to our rooms. At 3:30 a.m., I woke up with the scratching on my arm. That same scratching. I looked up, and I saw a woman in the bathroom mirror. And she spoke. She said, take me back. Please take me back. I lay down, and I tried to close my eyes, but her presence in the room felt like a living human. I collected myself, I threw on a sweater, and I got on that goddamn bike. And we rode all the way down to the Provincetown Inn, and I could feel the flesh to my face again like I did when I saw the great room. I was hot from the neck up, and I noticed that I felt no wind, even though I was riding as fast as I could to get to the next hotel. I rode into the parking lot, and in the front of the hotel, I felt the heat lift up off of my face, and the scratching finally stopped. And then I was alone, and the wind started to blow again, and I rode back to the hotel and drove my car everywhere for the rest of the weekend.
Interesting how Heather's story spoke to the qualities of the wind that ghostly night. In a tarot deck, the wind and the element of air is reflected by the suit of swords. That's spades in a regular card-playing pack. And swords in tarot describe our state of mind, our thoughts, and the way we communicate. If tonight's storm reflected a state of mind, I'd say it looks like insanity out there. Sitting here, I've got a view of the valley, and my seat feels like the still point in the middle of a forest rave. The pines are thrashing, and the white clouds are zipping by the moon so quickly. It looks like an Edgar Gorey illustration. I suppose the engine of all this wind is an early onset spring whipping through the atmosphere, but it does seem as if the seasons have shifted a bit, doesn't it? You know, I've seen melting glaciers in Tibet. I've seen the receding waters of the Sea of Galilee with my own eyes, and I've also seen icing, thick, gray pollution blotting out sunlight in China, India, even in northern Italy. Sometimes, the scariest possible thing isn't hiding in the shadows. It's boldly staring us right in the face. Yet, like characters in a slasher, we refuse to admit that there's something wrong. Worse yet, we keep feeding the monster. Perhaps it's because we created him, and none of us want to kill our darlings. But what about when those darlings grow out of control, turn around, and feed on us? Will it all have been worth it in the end? One of the interesting things about seasonal shifts is if you pay attention closely, you can detect the underbelly of any coming season long before it arrives. A warm August evening might bring you an October synthwave sunset fit for a Halloween movie poster. Cool September mornings might bring the taste of January frost to your lips. The trick is to pay attention, because everything is speaking to you all the time. The question is, can you slow down long enough to notice it? Now, it's getting late, so I'm going to ignore those strange noises coming up from below the fire tower and let us both be swept away by our final storyteller. Have you ever dreamed of running away to join the circus? Our final guest did just that. Elliot is a charismatic orator who literally ran away to clown in the circus. But what happens when the circus and the occult collide?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elliot to the stage.
So I was working in a bookstore in my college town. I'd graduated with a degree in history. And on lunch break, I ran into a friend of mine I'd been with in a play with in university. And I just casually said, "Hey, what are you doing this summer?" And he said, "Well, I'm touring America as a clown in the circus." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Can I go with you?" And he said, "Well, have you ever clowned before?" And I said, No, I can do it. I said, I can do it. I was the class clown in 8th grade. You know. And he said, "Can you ride an elephant?" And I said, "No problem. You know, fall off an elephant, how do you do that? You can't fall off an elephant." So anyway, he got a contract and we went down. First date was March 3rd in Odessa, Texas, 1979. And the owner, a big red-faced Texan Larry, said, "Got to be on the parking lot." He said, "Well, you know why we're here? We're here to have a good year and make some money, so let's have a good season." And I thought, well, I got to learn everybody's name. I'm going to be on the road for 9 months, you know. And I learned quickly not to bother with the workers. We lost one every show. We picked one up in every town. They were runaways, schizophrenics, criminals, bums, and they just came and go. But one of them we picked up early in the season in St. Louis, and his name was Dean. And he was a very simple guy. He was always like, "Hey, Elliot, how you doing?" And he had the strength of 3 men. I didn't know what barrel-chested meant till I'd seen him. His chest was muscled all around. He was like a barrel. Anyway, he was a simple guy and stronger than 3 men, and he was loading the truck. 2 guys would hand him a 60-pound rubber mat, and he could pile them tirelessly. And he was smart enough, they'd say, "Look, the next gig, we got to take the trapeze out first," and he would figure that out. So a few weeks later, he's driving the concession truck, and he's one of us. And we stayed the whole season, and I remember we'd go to these discos in Texas to pick up the local girls. It was like those cowboy movies when the piano stops and everybody looks up. Half the show was Mexican. So it was a little tense, but when Dean was there, strength of 3 men, loyal as a dog, simple bodyguard. Anyway, and I remember one disco, he drank too much beer, and he came up and said, "Hey, how you doing?" He slapped me in the back, and I thought, well, he's broken my spine. His hands were like iron. Anyway, long story, could be shorter. Last gig was Corpus Christi, Texas, and I was in our 12-foot trailer under the palm trees reading a book, really interesting book, given to me by a friend of mine, a girlfriend in college who taught art in Princeton. And it was called The Transformative Vision, Jose Arguelles. The whole New Age movement was based on his research into Mayan astrology. He also talked about the drug experiments of Antonin Artaud. The thesis of the book was there was an unhealthy split between the functioning of the right and the left hemisphere of the brain. He dates it to the Renaissance, and he supports it with everything from Mayan astrology to mandalas. Fascinating book. Anyway, I'm reading this book, and we decided to lay over, head back to Wisconsin the following day. The Mexicans all headed for the border because we were in Texas. And Dean walks by, and I'm sitting up in the trailer reading the book. So I figure the prop truck is still here. He hasn't left. And he looks up and he says, "Hey, Elliot," he says, "that's a good book." If I'd asked myself, could Dean read, I'd have said, probably not. So I was stunned. And I said, "Have you read it?" He said, "Yeah, Elliot." I said, "Well, I've read just about everything ever written on the occult." Now, if he'd read this, he had read everything, because this was the farthest neighborhood of the occult. You know, they didn't know where to put this book. It was City Lights Bookstore, Transformative Vision. They didn't know where to put it. So I was stunned again, and I said, "Have you read it?" And he said, "Yeah, I've read just about everything ever written on the occult." And I said, "You have?" And he said, "Yeah, Elliot." He said, I guess I can tell you." He says, "Do you know what a warlock is?" And I said, "You mean like a male witch?" He said, "Yeah, Elliot." He said, "Back in St. Louis, me and a couple of friends, we were practicing. And I woke up one day, and one of my friends, he was dead. The other one, he'd gone crazy, and I had to get on the road and disperse my powers, or I'd be dead too." He said, I don't know, he summoned something he couldn't control, and it killed him. That's the story.
I have a million unanswered questions. Like, how would Dean know when he was finished dispersing his powers? Was he getting rid of it by putting it on other people? Or was he trying to outrun it and disperse it through his rear view mirror? Did Elliot absorb Dean's energy? And can dangerous energy be transformed into something useful? Well, if you're interested in the occult, I write about it extensively in my Llewellyn's complete book of the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. The Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot was created by a secret society known as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a fascinating group of male and female magicians making magic at the turn of the century. Llewellyn's complete book of the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot is available at bookshops everywhere or through my website, sashagraham.com. Speaking of my website, do you have an interesting ghost story you'd like to share? Because I'd love to hear it and maybe have you on the show. Drop me a line at sashagraham.com and put ghost stories in the subject line. That's all for now. And until we meet again, this is Sasha Graham signing off. Stay spooky, stay cozy, and don't be afraid of the dark.